Hello, everyone. This is our next edition of Less Stress Parenting webinar. We have and are very excited to welcome Cindy Goldrich, our presenter today. She is a mental health counselor. She is a teacher consultant. She is a parenting specialist. And when she has spare time, she also writes and is also an author. We feel very special to have her with us today. This is just more of our ongoing efforts to get information into your hands, into the eyes and ears of parents at a time that you need it most in this changing educational paradigm. We could not be more excited to have Cindy Goldrich with us. I'm sure she has a lot more information to share about herself and the wonderful work that she does at Staying Ahead of the Game at Illuminos. We have a kind of bottom-up approach where we work very heavily with students and many of them with ADHD and support them to find success in school and beyond. Cindy spends most of her time working with parents, more of a top-down approach, as well as with professionals. So Cindy, without further ado, thank you for being with us. And we look forward to learning about your top 10 strategies for parenting children and teens with ADHD and EF for executive function challenges. Thank you for being here with us. For those of you who have questions along the way, Cindy is better than I am at juggling the FAQs kind of as they come through the chat. So please, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. As she sees them, she will try to address them. And we will try to leave a little bit of time for some FAQ at the end, of course, time permitting. So Cindy, thank you for being here. And I will hand it over to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, first of all, I do want to thank you guys for having me. You guys do just amazing work. And I think the association is just really wonderful. So thank you. I'm going to tell you all a little bit about myself because I always like to know who's talking to me. And then we will get started. So as Evan said, I am a mental health counselor and I'm also a board certified ADHD coach. And what that means is I have specific training in not just life coaching, but ADHD and executive function and how that impacts the brain and learning and emotion and everything else. It truly is an amazing field that has grown in the last 10, 15 years as we learn that there are specific challenges that people may have that we really can give them tools and strategies for, both through what you guys are doing at Illuminos. And for me, my area of specialty, as Evan said, is working with the parents because I know that parenting is not easy, and parenting when you have a challenging kid is even more complex. So as Evan said, I do write. So my first book, 8 Keys for Parenting Children with ADHD, was written specifically for parents. And the second book that I wrote, I actually co-authored with my daughter, who is an elementary ed special ed teacher here in Boulder, Colorado. And it is written really for mental health professionals and educators and speech language pathologists and OTs and really anyone that works with kids. It's got lots of handouts in there and whatnot. So I encourage you to look at that. That's probably enough about me, but I really do thank you all for being here because I do find that the more we can educate parents, the more you can help your kids and the more you can help those that are helping your kids help you as well. So my objective here today is really just to provide an overview of the challenges of parenting kids and teens. I encourage you, please, to feel free to ask your questions as we go. We've got plenty of people looking at the chat, so if I don't see it in the chat, Evan and Wendy, I'm sure you can break in and tell me, who has what questions. If I feel like the question is not something I can answer right now, don't worry, I'll either tell you I can get in touch with you or I can answer it at the end. And for those of you who are interested in getting more information, because I know sometimes people have to jump off, you can always email me, Evan, or maybe someone could just put it in the chat. My email address is Cindy@PTS Coaching, and my website is ptscoaching.com. And if anyone does, want copies of these slides or, follow-up information, just reach out to me. Happy to do that. All right, so now let's jump in and see the top 10 strategies. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is ADHD, the basics and beyond. So what do we need to know? Well, what do you think of when you hear ADHD? And maybe you just want to write it in the chat. Not what you know because you've learned so much, but what do you think the general population just thinks about when they hear ADHD? Anyone have some thoughts about that? Hyperactive, scattered, excuses, yep, very busy child, no focus, spaz, naughty kids, disorganized, right? Behavioral issues, liars, yeah. See that? It's such poor parenting, yeah, angry. That's why even though it is now 2022, we still have a lot of work to do to make sure that those that work with our kids, educators, everyone understand what ADHD really is. Because in fact, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition. You are born with it. Poor parenting cannot and does not create ADHD. Whether you have given your kid too much sugar or you have let them watch too much TV, those things do not create ADHD. They may exacerbate it, but they're not going to make it happen. It is highly hereditable. Now, what does that mean? That means that roughly about 40% of kids who have ADHD, at least one of their parents or significant relatives has ADHD. Now, why does that matter? Well, teacher says to you, hey, you know what? Johnny's having a really hard time getting organized. Could you go home and organize Johnny? And the parent is thinking, and who's coming home and organizing me, right? Basically, what this means is that we have to make sure as we support parents that we realize that you may have your own challenges. And so we work with you on your ADHD as well. Also, approximately 9.5% of school-age children can be diagnosed appropriately with ADHD. Now, what I mean by that is there are lots of different ways to diagnose ADHD, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes as a different strategy. But you want to make sure that your schools know that your kid is not the only one going through these challenges. That's why I go into school districts and I do teacher training as well, because we need the teachers, the educators to really know, because they're dealing with so much of this. And as you guys all wrote in that chat, not everyone realizes what ADHD is. Just so you know, mental health professionals, at least when I was trained years ago, we are not specifically trained in ADHD, maybe a paragraph or so. It's its own specialty. And same thing with educators. You have to make sure you're keeping up with the professional development to acquire that. And lastly, about 85% of adults with ADHD are undiagnosed and would qualify for treatment. What does that mean? That means that most adults who have ADHD were never diagnosed as kids. You can be diagnosed as an adult and you can get treatment. And by treatment, I don't just mean medication. I mean the type of thing we're doing here: education, support, tools, strategies. Okay? But it's very clear. The debate is over. All of the major medical organizations, whether it's the American Psychological Association or Psychiatric Association, Pediatric Association, everyone agrees that ADHD is a true and real disorder, and you can diagnose it and treat it. There are basically 3 presentations. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but there's the predominantly inattentive presentation. We used to call this ADD. If you are still calling this ADD, that's not current. It is all called ADHD. If someone is inattentive, then their appropriate label is ADHD inattentive type. By the way, anyone want to write in the chat if you happen to know? Anyone know what this was called before it was called ADD? I'm just going to give it a moment and see if anyone knows. So before we were calling this ADD, does anyone know what this was called? Okay, I'm not seeing any answers. It was called minimal brain dysfunction. Yes, well, close. Someone wrote Mina. Minimal brain dysfunction, MBD, right? Yeah, we've come a long way, but I promise you, if you work with me, you will know this is not the appropriate name for this. I do not look at this as a disorder. I look at this as a difference with challenges. Very different, right? So of course, we also have the predominantly hyperactive and impulsive presentation. And then we have the combined type. And you can see all of these descriptions right there in the DSM, that Diagnostic Statistical Manual. So understanding how executive function impacts learning and emotion. The executive functions are basically the set of neurologically based skills that have to do with managing oneself and one's resources. Basically, it's how we do what we intend to do. It's our action, it's our performance, okay? And the executive function manage how you do what you intend to do. It's your brain's control center, right? We call it the CEO of the brain. It's located in the prefrontal cortex. Now, I'm not going to get too scientific on you guys. I'm sure that's not what you came to hear. But basically, brain, okay? Prefrontal cortex is right here. I always say, take out your brain, make a fist, and the front part of the brain, that's what we're talking about. Where the thumb is, that's where your executive function system is. And it's the last part of the brain to develop. So that means it develops from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. Typically, your brain is not developed fully until age 25 to 30, which is interesting when you think about all the life decisions you have to make in your 30s. In your 20s, right? And if you have older kids or teachers who are really young, or you're very young yourself, you realize that your brain is still growing. Now, basically, what we see when we talk about ADHD is we talk about hyperactivity, impulsivity, inattentiveness. We kind of call that the triangle, right? That's what we see. But I suspect it's what lies underneath what we see that really has you joining me this afternoon, right? So we think of that as the iceberg, and what's below is what the concerns are. So first and foremost, of course, we have executive function skills. And I know that's what Illuminos works on with your kids all the time. But I want to make sure you understand a basic understanding of this. I'm just going to give you real basics, okay? The executive function system has to do with, as I said, doing what you intend to do, things like planning and organizing and time management and initiation and activation and working memory and processing speed and your emotions and self-talk. All of those things have to do with your executive function skills. But watch what happens. Okay, anyone here say to your kid, let's say you said, hey, Johnny, do me a favor, go upstairs, get your backpack, your shoes, your tennis rack, and on the way downstairs, could you grab my water bottle and just see if I shut my light off? Anyone have any feelings as I said all of that, right? Any thoughts about how your kids would do with all of that? Yeah, someone just said LOL, right? Because usually what I hear is, oh boy, yep, that would never happen, right? So what is the emotion that you guys are feeling right now when you think about asking your child and them not doing that? Any ideas? What are your emotions? Overwhelmed, stress, anxiety. Anyone here feel like my kid doesn't listen to me? He's so defiant. He doesn't do what I ask him to do, right? Someone says sad. Yes, right? I've been doing this a few years. I know how people usually react to that. So at any rate, we get into our emotions. Well, what if you knew and understood that being able to follow those steps requires using your working memory? Your working memory is basically your brain's search engine. It's how you integrate what you need to do, whether it's learn or do or observe, with what you already know. And not only that, you have to be able to do it in the moment and filter out all those other things going on. So once you realize that working memory might be the reason that your child is not following the directions, then how do we feel? We feel, oh, okay, maybe I need to solve this problem. Maybe I need to build my child's working memory, or maybe more appropriately, I need to support in the moment. For example, very simple, and I'm sure most of you realize this once you realize that's what you need to do. Maybe I can give Johnny a list. Maybe I can give him just a few of the steps and have him come back with me. Maybe I can ask him to repeat it back to me just to make sure he heard me, not to test him, but just see if we're on the same page, right? Lots of things we can do as long as we calm down our emotion and frustration around it and realize that we need to do some problem solving. Okay, that's one of the reasons why this is so important to understand what all the executive functions are. When I do my Calm and Connected workshop series for parents, I spend 2 hours. The first session is all about ADHD and executive function and how those all impact learning, motivation, behavior, and really your whole family system. Because I would expect it's impacting not just your affected child, but the siblings and your relationship with your spouse. It's affecting all of that, right? And to add to that, well, there could be up to a 30% delay in executive function development when you have ADHD, which means your kid that's in 3rd grade who's so intelligent, because this has nothing to do with intelligence, can't seem to pack up his backpack. And you're thinking, you could do this, why can't you do that? Or you did it yesterday, why can't you do it today? You need to understand all of those variables, because that's how we're going to be able to support your kids, support you in supporting your kids. And of course, how many of your kids go 0 to 100 when they get emotional, right? Like they just quickly lose it? Yes. So that is the deficits in the emotional self-regulation. Guess what? That is part of ADHD. It's not like, oh, and my kid doesn't listen and gets upset. It's part of this whole thing called executive function and ADHD. And there's this understimulation in the brain when you are bored. And can't they just sit still and pay attention? Oh my goodness, right? For the hyperactive ones? Well, here's the thing. Not so well. What we have found in the science is that your brain gets activated when you move. So remember I said there was an understimulation of the reward in the brain, right? When they're bored, we want to stimulate the brain, and we can't always do it by making the work exciting as much as we'd like to, but what we can do is encourage movement. But here's the thing. Let's say this is my fidget. Okay, it's my pen. And if I'm sitting by myself, I might be clicking it a lot as I'm thinking and working, and that would be fine, right? It's in my kind of secondary focus. It's in the background of my thoughts. But if I were to take this pen and say, wow, this is so cool. Look at all the ridges there. And it's got this clip, right? Now it became my primary focus, or in essence, a toy. So this was a tool. This is a toy. Secondary focus, primary focus. We want to help kids understand fidgeting and empower them to fidget. Now, if you're going to tell me, yeah, but he keeps breaking the thing, or he keeps, waving in my face, and he says he's just fidgeting, we need to teach them how that fidgeting does not involve being destructive or distractive to anyone else. Right? So there's lots of things we could do to support them in helping them move. Okay? The next thing is, anyone here have a kid who spends way too long in the bathroom? Kind of like spaces out in there. Yes, I see. Or maybe you or your spouse, right? I see someone said me, right? Right? So here's the thing. Let's understand ADHD and time. Do you know that research has shown us that people with ADHD, regardless of if they're on stimulant medication or not, do not have as accurate a sense of time? You may, if you know anyone that says, I don't understand. I thought I had plenty of time. I don't know where the time went, because their sense of time is not as accurate. And by the way, sense of time is developmental. Your sense of time when you're 5 years old is not the same as your sense of time when you're 15 or 30 or 50, right? You see things so much more as the grown-up You see time in front of you differently than the younger kids do. So I strongly recommend, and if you send me your email address, as I said, I can send out follow-up information, but I recommend using something called a time timer, okay? This is a very low-tech device. Let's see if you can see it. I could set this for 15 minutes and then say, hey, Johnny, the bus will be here when the red is gone. And just so you know, you can use this. I use this in my own practice. Adults use these all the time because it's a visual sense of time passing. If you just set a timer for 5 minutes, the number 5 does not look differently or feel differently than the number 3. But when you see the red disappearing, that's very different. So I suggest put one of these timers in your kitchen, in the bathroom, in their room. You can get it as an app on the smart boards. Okay, lots of different places. I see some people putting their email addresses in the chat. Just send me an email, cindy@ptscoaching.com, and that'll be a lot easier. At any rate, so my first strategy, and I would say my most important strategy, is please get fully educated. This was just a little bit of the education you need about ADHD and executive function and their impact on learning, motivation, behavior, and the whole family system. Okay? Now, number 2, proper diagnosis. Why does it matter? I mean, can't you just go to Google now and get a diagnosis for ADHD? Please don't do that. It doesn't matter how many checkoffs you do and you see that, oh, your kid is on all these things. A proper diagnosis is so important because we want to rule out things that may make it seem like it's ADHD, but it's not. So for instance, if your child has Crohn's disease or a thyroid condition or severe food allergies, by the way, if you put your kid on a gluten-free diet to help with ADHD, that will only help with ADHD if they have a gluten allergy. In other words, it's not helping with the ADHD, it's helping with their allergies. Having allergies may make you more irritable and make your symptoms of ADHD more exacerbated. I hope that made sense to everyone, okay? So the point is we want to rule out things. We also have to make sure that we've had a good observation in 2 or more settings, meaning school, home, maybe even on the sports field, maybe even at school in different subject matters, because kids are going to show up differently in different situations. We need to see across the board, what are we seeing? Okay. Next, what is involved in a treatment plan? Well, medication may be involved. I always tell parents, medication is a very personal, very complex, very private decision. As a parent coach, I don't diagnose and I don't medicate, but I am here to support you in making those decisions, in understanding the ramifications. And if you are using medication, helping you work that into the family system. Okay? School accommodations and modifications, those could be very valuable. But again, I would encourage you, and I'm sure the people at Illuminos that work with your kids can really help you on this. I would encourage you to make sure that you're having conversations with your kids about what support they really feel they need and what support they are getting at school, and making sure that everyone's on the same page, because it doesn't matter what the IEP or the 504 plan says. If the child is not willing and comfortable to take advantage of these services, it's not going to do the good that it can do. And again, that has to do also with how you are talking with your child about those things. So that's where that parenting piece again comes into play. Therapy can sometimes be helpful, but just please know you must be seeing a therapist who is an expert in ADHD, and not every therapist is. They could be a wonderful therapist, but if they don't understand ADHD fully, you may not be getting the right support. So again, reach out either to Illuminos or to me if you need to find some good providers in your area. And coaching. Of course, I think coaching is valuable. I think if your child is going to Illuminos, or if they've got the academic concerns and the executive functioning concerns, they have excellent coaches. If you feel like you need coaching, That's where I and my team come in terms of the parenting. And of course, parent education, as I've been saying all along. Now, your perspective. Why does this matter? Well, I suggest having what I call a disability perspective. And notice I put the word disability in small letters. Nobody likes to think of their kid as having a disability. And they don't look disabled for sure, right? And they don't act like they have a disability sometimes. But we have to realize that this is a true condition and there are real challenges. The example that I gave of working memory, you can't say to your kid, listen, I know you have a weak working memory, but we got to go, we got to do all this. So just come on, right? We have to acknowledge, we have to realize that these challenges are real. Also, I encourage you, please see their strengths, not just their weaknesses. Why do we always see their weaknesses the most? Because those are the things we worry about changing, right? Those are the things we feel like, well, he's doing fine in that area, but I got to work on this. It's the areas he's doing fine in or she's doing fine in that we can capitalize on. If they absolutely love playing baseball, I'm going to utilize that strength in so many other areas of his life and the conversations we have, the expectations I make, and everything else. And try to see the world through your child's eyes. Literally get down to eye level, whether they're 5 or 15 or bigger than you and they're 20 years old or whatever. See what is going on for them. All the reprimands they're getting, all the disappointing, that they're doing for people and how much they're disappointing themselves. I promise you that's what's going on a lot. And of course, we need unconditional love to offset the reprimands, the reminders of their challenges. And finally, I always say, parent the child you have. The first chapter of my book, 8 Keys to Parenting, is all about parenting the child you have, not the child you thought you'd have, not the child you wish you'd have, not the child you'd have if your mother-in-law got her way and you were doing it that way, but the child you're blessed with. Which brings us to our parenting skills. And excuse me, I'm just going to have a sip of water. Okay, so anyone try logic? If you just sit still, you'll get your work done. Or if you just hurry up and get your work done, you can go out and play. Or just calm down and I'll get you some ice cream. Anyone ever try logic before? Yeah, that doesn't work so well. Love, intuition, logic. When you've got a complex child, it's not enough, okay? Also, I know you love your kids. You can love them to pieces. You can be patient, all of that, but that's not enough either. And being strict and having rules, well, here's the thing. Just being strict can sometimes backfire on you. We'll talk about that in a few minutes also. But you need a black belt in parenting. You need ADHD specific tips and tools and strategies and knowledge. Okay? All right. Number 5, let's look at the home environment. Well, life inside their heads is often chaotic and messy, right? And they don't have, as we said, that internal sense of time and order. They need a calm environment. Put in the chat if you have a really calm environment all the time. The kids are always calm, you're always calm, right? Not so easy. And I understand it. I promise you, it's not easy, but it's doable. And that's the important thing. They do need structure and consistency to reduce the stress and the chaos, but they need structure and consistency that makes sense for that particular child's profile, which, by the way, might be different than your other child, right? You can't parent both kids the same way necessarily. And they need the support at the point of performance. Point of performance means face-to-face, as opposed to yelling upstairs to Johnny and saying, hey, Johnny, could you, right? Point of performance, it's so important to have that face-to-face contact. And they are going to look to test the limits. Very often, these are strong-willed kids. Let me know if you have a strong-willed kid, right? They're going to look to test the limits. You've got to have them. And if you feel like you're losing it, right? You're getting out of control yourself. That's because you haven't been able to yet establish appropriate boundaries, consequences. But I don't rely so heavily on consequences, by the way. In fact, in my Common Connected workshop, that's 7 sessions, I don't even talk about consequences until session 6, because there's so much we can do to build up without even going there. Okay? Now, your child's lens. What do they know about ADHD and executive function? Well, I suggest we teach them about the brain. I literally teach parents to teach kids what all the executive functions are and how that's all operating. And how do they feel about having ADHD? How's their self-care? What do I mean by self-care? Nutrition, exercise, sleep. Now, by the way, don't all kids need proper nutrition, exercise, and sleep? Of course they do. But when you have a kid who gets dysregulated more easily, then these things become even more important. What is their role in their own treatment? Do they know how they learn best? Do they know what their rights are? Do they know that they're entitled to extended time on a test or whatever else is in their IEP or 504? And can they advocate for themselves? Now, by the way, advocacy is a developmental skill. It cannot be an expectation. Whether you are 5 years old or teenager or adult or way older adult, not everybody feels comfortable asking for help, knowing how to ask for help, knowing when to ask for help, what to do if the help is not available. These are things we need to support them in. We can't just say, well, you should go to your teacher. There's a reason they're not going to their teacher. Let's figure it out and support them in that, rather than just repeating our expectation. Also, do they see their own interests and talents and passions as gifts and possibilities? Now, if you're struggling to talk to your kids about ADHD, on my website under the resource section, I have lots of books for kids. I always suggest read the book first before you sit down and read it with your child, but there are lots of really great books out there. Okay, number 7, let's talk about family. Your marriage and your family relationships. Here's the reality. It's not easy parenting these kids, as we said, and you and your spouse or your parenting partner may love each other tremendously, but you will both parent it differently, and you may have different concepts on how to parent. So while I don't do couples therapy, I do couples coaching. We want to help you get on the same page in terms of how to parent your child. And this has to do with whether you're an intact couple or divorced, right? We need you guys working together. Relationships do take a hit, okay? But I also think there's tremendous opportunity because you get to know yourself so much better and your partner so much better. So it could really bring you closer as well as create all that stress. Also, think about the other children in the family, the impact on the siblings. You gotta have some special time with them too, because all that Sally knows is you spend so much time with Johnny. It doesn't matter that the time you're spending with Johnny is, making sure he gets his homework done or taking him to the OT or whoever else you're taking him to. Sally just knows that you're spending all that time. And she's sitting in the waiting room getting to do her homework while Johnny's in there doing who knows what. And for the older kids as well. We can't make one child responsible for the other when we have our own challenges getting that child to do things. Think about your own self-care, your exercise, your nutrition, right? Your sleep. They always say put the oxygen mask on yourself first, otherwise you're not going to be able to help. Your emotional well-being. Nurture your friendships. A lot of parents get very isolated. One of the things I love when I do my workshop is parents get to connect with other parents who are going through some of these struggles. You need people you can talk to. And you also need people you can take a break with and just go be with your friends. You can't be all time consumed with your parenting because you're going to burn out and your kid's going to sense that. All righty. Number 8. Never go alone to school meetings. Now, I'm not saying you need to bring a paid advocate, but these meetings are stressful. And when we're under stress, we have a harder time listening. We have a harder time hearing. We have a harder time remembering what we want to say. So bring a friend, bring a sibling, bring someone with you who can take notes and help you keep track of what's going on. Also, keep accurate records. Keep accurate records of what services your child's been provided, what medication they've been on, what dose they've been on, what reaction they've had, right? All of those things, because you never know when you're going to need that. So keep the accurate records and keep them organized. And by the way, when your kid becomes a parent, they may want to look back at all of that information as well. And always work with the teachers, not against them. I know how frustrating it can be. I know that some of the teachers do not have all the information that they need to have, okay? If you're struggling to work with them, you may need to speak to the guidance counselor or the principal, or you may need to bring someone in with you, and it might even be one of your kids' coaches or one of my coaches, just to help bridge that gap, okay? Appropriate accommodations. Make sure that, as I said, you're talking to your child about what they're getting, okay? Years ago, by the way, there was clarification regarding the 504 plan. I'm not going to read all of this, but what I want you to know is that just because your child is doing well academically, let's say they're getting all A's, does not mean that they cannot qualify for appropriate services at school. Okay, so you can look at, and I can send this to you, the link for this. You can look at the Office of Civil Rights letter on ADHD to get more information about that. Okay, number 9, it truly does take a village, doesn't it? And you are the chief and officer and the head coach, but even you need your own support. So make sure that everyone's working together to raise this child as a resilient and confident child. And then number 10, as I said, parent the child you have, because you know your child best. Trust your instinct, your inner voice. And your child knows themselves too, so believe their experience. And pay attention to their gifts and talents, as I said, because these are the keys to helping them stay confident and optimistic. And the challenges they have are real. They really are. And help them accept and embrace the support services. It's going to make it a lot easier for them. It's all about your relationship with them, though, okay? Because we know that the greatest impact that parents can have on their children is to help them understand what's truly getting in the way of meeting their goals and providing them with the knowledge, the tools, and the strategies they need to succeed in school, at home, socially, and in life. Parent coaching works, okay? Just a few things about parent coaching. I'm not going to go into all of this, but I want to make sure that you understand, am I enabling my child or supporting my child? Am I creating boundaries that are going to trigger my child, or are they actually encouraging growth? Are the consequences I'm giving, are they really triggering, or are they building skills? These are all the things that we work on, okay? This is just a little information about the Common Connected Workshop series that I mentioned. On the left side is what the 7 sessions are, but if you feel like you just want to take session 1, which is a full understanding of the social and emotional impact of ADHD and executive function, you can sign up for session 1 and then just decide later. So at this point, I want to turn it over to any questions anyone has, any comments. And if while we're doing the Q&A, if anyone wants to just write in the chat, what's your greatest takeaway? What's one action step you feel you can take? What's something that you learned? It might encourage other parents to think about that as well. Okay. All right. I have not been looking at the chat very much. Does anyone have something that they want to ask or
So
comment?
someone asked, do you help parents where one has undiagnosed ADHD and one doesn't? Meaning, I think the parents.
Yes, absolutely. Here's the thing. Many parents come to me and they say, I don't know yet if my kid has ADHD. I don't know if I have ADHD. If you are struggling, we can help you. Okay. You don't have to have a diagnosis. You don't have to be getting medication. You don't have to be getting support, anything else. We can still help you understand and develop the tools and the strategies you need. Good question.
So there was a question actually, I think for Evan and I, which is how do we get a 7th grader to agree to work with a coach? And we're actually really good at it as part of our process. When we're working with students and onboarding, we actually have an extended meeting with them, with someone on our team who has a counseling and education background and is fabulous working with the kids. And usually when the kids start the call, they're like, my mom and dad made me be here. And then by the end, they're like, I think this sounds really great. I think this could help me become more independent, own my own schedule, not have my parents hounding me so much, et cetera. And we're happy to talk to you more about that. I don't want to take up too much time just in light of the fact that Cindy's on here right now, but you guys, I will post where you can schedule a call with me. It's free, a call with me or Evan, and we will happily share answers to questions like that too.
And just to add in there really quickly, I would be lying if I said it never happened in 16 years that a student was still resistant. In those cases, what we recommend is saying, okay, it sounds like you feel like you acknowledge that your current systems are not working, but that you feel like you can make the necessary changes on your own. So let's set a specific date, some period of time down the road. It may be a month down the road, 6 weeks down the road. And if you haven't met some very clear objectives on your own, can you agree now that you would then be open, to this? And even the most resistant kids are pretty quick to make an agreement like that. And then all of a sudden, 6 weeks later, they are more willing and open to working with somebody to make those necessary changes. Sorry, go ahead, Cindy.
No, I was going to say, I think that's all very true. That's a great approach. I will say that sometimes parents have a hard time even getting their kid to agree to going in on that call. So what I usually suggest in that case is, let me work with you, parent, on how you're communicating with your child so that we can help your child be coachable so that they can then go to you guys and get that support, because I do think that support that you give is so vital. But sometimes what's getting in the way is the kid is just in such defiance or anger or frustration that they're shut down from any of it. And that's where that top down from the parenting really becomes helpful.
That's awesome. Thank you, Cindy. And, I think that's really, really, really helpful. They say it takes a village for a reason.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Okay, I'm trying to go through some of the questions that you haven't answered yet. So could you give an example of an appropriate limit or consequence for a child who breaks a family rule?
That is a really great question. I'm going to frustrate the asker a little bit. And here's why. I don't like to play whack-a-mole. And what I mean by that is I could solve that problem, but I'm going to make another problem go up. And that's why I say parent the child you have. I would have to understand a lot more, and I could very easily in a session understand a lot more about what kind of rule is it? Why is the kid not doing it? What have you done before? What kind of communication do you have with your kid? Where is the kid in relation to you when we're having this difficulty in conversation and everything else? So there are definite strategies and tools I have for you, but I can't just give an easy answer without having a lot more context.
Another question, do you have specific advice for teenagers? My 14-year-old is resistant to support, help, etc. Very independent as a teacher. It's hard to figure out what I should do to help her.
Well, that's exactly the case I think we were just talking about, where the kid is resistant to help. And that's why, we're very successful as parent coaches working with you to see where this breakdown is, see how we can shift the communication between you and your child and some of the expectations, so that they are no longer venting all their anger at you, and instead they're starting to take responsibility and interest in, okay, fine, how do I get mom off my back? How do I get dad off my back? Yes, I'm willing to go in for the coaching.
Let's see. That's very helpful. Thank you. Do girls seem to get diagnosed with ADHD less than boys?
Great question. That's actually a very current question. We used to think that boys were much more likely to have ADHD than girls. What we have seen and really been able to quantify in years, in the recent years, is that it's not quite as different. It just shows up so differently for the girls. Girls tend to be more inattentive, and therefore they're often missed. But here's the really important red flag. Women and girls are very often diagnosed with anxiety or depression, where in reality, the proper diagnosis includes ADHD. And when we work on the ADHD, the anxiety and the depression can actually go down, because then we are really meeting them where their challenges really are. Does that make sense? So a lot of the girls are not being diagnosed, not because they shouldn't qualify, but because we're just saying, oh, they must be just depressed or anxious.
Here's one about a medication, wondering about the increased dangers of self-medicating. This is more about a child adding marijuana or calming, other things they can take and do in order to calm themselves or stimulate them, whatever they need. And what happens if they're already taking medication as well?
Okay, so there are many people who self-medicate, whether they're children or adults. And two of the most popular things are marijuana, right? Which, by the way, dulls cognition. So it may be calming you so that you can chill out a little bit, but it also is dulling your ability to concentrate in many cases. So very important that you're recognizing that. I'm not going to go into the whole new world of medical marijuana and everything else. And I live in Colorado, so I'm very aware of all of that. But most kids are not doing it in a formulaic way. So it is important to look at that. Another thing a lot of people use, whether they're children or adults, is coffee. Coffee stimulates, right? How many of you can't start your day without your morning cup of coffee? I, by the way, have never had a cup of coffee, so I can't really relate. But what I will tell you is this: coffee as a stimulant is not a great idea, because think of the habits that they're developing. They're going to go off to college and, oh, I got to study for my test. Okay, I better drink my coffee, and then they're never getting sleep. So I would much rather get to the core issue and saying, what is the support that you need? Can medication play a role? And if so, what role should it play? Right? So that's my little spiel on all of that.
Cindy, there are two questions that I get a lot, and I find them very helpful to parents. They could be unrelated, but I'm going to relate them.
Okay.
One question is, does ADHD ever go away? And number two is, if a child starts on medication, does it necessarily mean that they will be on medication for the rest of their lives? Love if you could address those. I think it'd be really helpful to parents.
Yep, those are two great questions, and actually two very different questions in that. Statistically, we believe that about 75% of people can outgrow their ADHD. Now, what does that really mean? I don't know. I don't know whether they outgrew their ADHD or they just found a way to live their life that were really managing it. Maybe in the career that they chose, maybe in the supports that they have around them, right? So it's really not about can they outgrow it as much as it's about how can we raise their awareness of where their challenges are and what are the tools and strategies that they can utilize. So that's that first piece. Now, in terms of medication, there are different kinds of medication. There's so many different ways of dispensing it now and everything else. I know many adults who will take a med because, let's say they're a lawyer and they have to prep for a trial. They may take their meds to do all of that reading and groundwork and organizing, but then when they're doing the trial, they don't take the med. Why? Because remember, the brain gets more stimulated the more you are innately, internally motivated and activated. If that's the area you're getting activated, maybe in that area you don't need it. But for kids, we're not there yet. So I do like to see the consistency if they're using it, but that doesn't mean that they're developing a reliance on it. And that's the thing that you got to understand. The pills don't teach skills. The pills are going to make it easier for them to learn and do what they need to do. But when it's not in your system, you don't have it. And the pills might be helping you with your, emotional regulation and processing speed, things like that. So as they get older, they may use it as a tool in their toolbox. Did that answer that a little bit?
Yes, of course. I think that's a wonderful answer. I use the term compensatory skills that, as kids mature and matriculate, kids who have managed their ADHD well build some very effective compensatory skills. Just different words to say what you said, that they get better over time at managing it. So it may look like it went away, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it went away. The most important thing is, can they function every day? And they get better at doing that.
Right.
So we're wrapping up to 1:30 or 12:30 if you're in the Texas area. If you're elsewhere, we're getting to the end of time for this, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I did want to ask you to answer one question because it is a hot topic today, especially given COVID, anxiety, depression, and that is there are a lot of kids refusing to go to school, and a couple of parents have asked, how do I approach that? What do I do? And would love to get your answer on that.
It is a big issue. It really is a big issue. I'm going to start with parent the child you have. I'm going to start with what's going on with that child. What is really getting in the way? And a lot of what we do as parent coaches is we work together with the kids. I teach you a whole process on collaborating and using that for problem solving. There are really specific conversations we can have, but we have to set up those conversations. So in terms of those kids, reach out. Obviously, I can support you with that, but we have to believe their experience, and we have to understand what's getting in the way, and we have to work with the schools as much as we can. Sometimes little tweaks in what's going on and the expectations in terms of going back to school can make the world of difference. But some kids have discovered, hey, you know what? I learn better at home. Well, let's see how they're learning better at home and why they're learning better at home, so that we can get them back into the school where they're getting not just the learning, but everything else they're needing.
And I really do want to make this the last question, but it is important because I've had about 10 parents ask it throughout, and that is, can you address screen time? Parents managing screen time for kids, which is like such a nightmare. And what your suggestions are. We obviously have suggestions too, but go ahead with what you would tell parents.
What I would tell parents is a few things. And again, every parent is going to be different. Every situation is going to be different. One of the interesting things I've seen with screens is, what purpose is it playing in your kid's life? Is it playing a social aspect? Is it an escape? Is it because it's just so stimulating and they love it? But guess what? A lot of times they're really getting so much value from some of those screens too. We want to understand, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? What's making it so hard to resist, and everything else. And we can understand that, and we can work with that. I don't like to just say, okay, at such and such a time, I'm ripping out the cord, or if you do this, then you can have extra screen time, things like that. There are times we can use that as a motivator, but it can backfire more often than it doesn't, unless we are really doing a full, comprehensive understanding and conversation about the role it's playing for the kid, the concerns they have in us shutting it off, our concerns, and all of that. And then we can develop a contract along with that. That's my...
I hope that helps everyone. I did note just now that you can send an email to hello@illuminos.co. It is .co, not .com, and Cindy@ptscoaching.com. One of us will respond with an answer, and that way, we'll definitely give you answers. There's a lot of questions we actually didn't get to, but we are happy to answer them. I know that Evan and I are happy to always get on the phone with the parent and talk through things. There were some questions about, do I really need a neuropsych or psychoeducational testing? What, it's too much money. How do I deal with all of that? Those are all things that we do talk to parents all the time about, and we do provide as much parent support as we can. I encourage you all to follow us on social media, and Cindy as well. We post a lot of free information and ways to get answers to some of your questions, as well as people like Cindy we post about that you can get help from others that exist that we really respect and believe can help your family. So following us can give you not only educational information about ADHD and other learning differences, but also the resources that you need. And feel free to reach out either through email or through our website or through Cindy's website and her email to reach out and ask those questions or set up a free consultation call with us. We're happy to talk to you.
Yes, and we will put our websites in the chat, illuminos.co, illuminos.co, and saotg.com. There are some wonderful resources there on Instagram, Illuminos_coaching, and at saotg. Our 2 Instagram handles with some awesome free tips, resources that are timely, etc. And on those websites, you can also sign up for a newsletter that'll bring additional free and timely tips, as well as notifications of more awesome webinars, just in an ongoing effort to get information you need completely for free to you at a time that you need it most. So thank you, everybody in the DC metro area, everybody in the Texas areas, and everybody else all over the country who have joined us. If you are a professional and have enjoyed this and we don't know you but should, please reach out. We would love to chat with you. Neuropsych testers, psychoeducational testers, or even mental health professionals, etc. Cindy, you're such an amazing resource. I don't know how you have time to wear all the hats that you do. This has been such rich and wonderful information. I learned some things here and have made some good notes. I hope everyone else has too. Thank you so much for giving your time. Wendy, you want to talk about the recording of this and how folks can find that?
So we are recording this. It will be posted on our parent resource page, probably by the end of the week. Some people had audio problems. It was not on our end. So I can promise you that if you do want to see whatever you missed, you can log in and watch it. Cindy has been fantastic to share her time and all of this information, as well as the PowerPoint. And as I said, feel free to log in at any time once it's posted, probably, I'm guessing, by Friday. And we'll send an email out as well to watch it again and even take notes on some of the points, or realize that you have more questions, and you can reach out to any of us. Cindy, Evan, myself, and everyone who supports us at our companies. So we thank you for your time. We thank you for registering. I will post the IG handle again. Some people have asked for that in one moment. Evan, do you have that in front of you real quick? I think it's at Illuminos_coaching, but for Instagram.
Yep, Illuminos_coaching, and then SAOTG is at SAOTG. And then you can look us up, Illuminos or Staying Ahead of the Game, on Facebook as well.
And Cindy, what do you have? You're just at PTS Coaching, right, for your social media?
For all my social media, it's at PTS Coaching. That's right.
Perfect. Okay. Cindy, any closing words? Sorry.
No, I mean, just, reach out if I can support you. And if you are a professional and interested in becoming an ADHD parent coach, I do training for that as well. And I'm always happy to share that as well.
And I promise you that we have recommended parents to see people like Cindy and Cindy in the past. We find it really helpful if we're helping your student and you're getting some insights on the parenting coaching side. So if you need a referral, if you reach out to Cindy and she doesn't have availability, or you need something else, just let us know. But we do really highly encourage folks to learn how to deal with their children. Positive versus negative rewards and all those things can really make the relationship at home so much better. So we hope that you'll reach out to Cindy, and we hope to meet some of you guys, and we look forward to you attending additional free webinars like this with great folks like Cindy.